So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today once again for the Pure Digital Passion podcast with Moses Kemibara. And today I'm actually extremely happy to have somebody on this particular conversation. His name is Firas Ahmad, who's the founder and CEO of a company called AzamPay. And he's somebody that I've gotten to know over LinkedIn over the last few years. And I feel like I know him because, digitally nowadays, we often get to know people digitally, then eventually we meet. So thank you very much, Firas, for joining us today.
Thanks, Moses. Very much appreciate the invitation. Excited to be here. And I've actually been following your podcast, so I'm very excited to be a part of it now. So thank you for that.
Well, quirky detail, you're now my third interviewee from Tanzania, from the great city of Dar es Salaam. So it's a pleasure to see that we're getting a lot of people from Tanzania, which, as you may know, is actually where I am originally from, by the way.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
but yeah, Tanzania is coming up in the technology space. Its ecosystem is certainly developing now. So I think in Kenya you have the big brother, and in Tanzania the younger brother is growing up. Looks like so. So maybe you'll hear from more of us soon.
No, absolutely. And I mean, like I mentioned, I was there, back in I think it was late January, early February, and I mean, 2 years since I was last in Tanzania, obviously due to COVID, and I mean the level of development and things I saw happening there was really impressive. So Tanzania is definitely growing up.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, one point I would make about that is, unique aspects to Tanzania that make it, I think, kind of a good place for this type of technology innovation to happen. It's got this in the population, it's got mobile money, it's actually got this system that is fairly competitive. So you have multiple players in the mobile money space, and you have a regulatory environment that is actually, it was the first to do interoperability on mobile money platforms, and it's actually been very progressive in terms of being open to new ideas. So I think interesting place that you'll see interesting things come out of soon, hopefully.
Great, and absolutely. And again, like I said, I was just there 2 months ago, and things are really looking like they're on the go. So maybe for us, we can start off by you giving us a bit of your professional and personal background. Who are you? How did you get here?
Yeah, sure. So I guess kind of entrepreneurial journey started. I was a grad student, and a professor of mine had started it was not actually in the technology or the fintech space, it was in the energy space, renewable energy space. He started a company which I ended up joining after I graduated, and it took me to kind of South Asia, India, Bangladesh region, converting waste into energy on a couple of different applications. And that's where I kind of got comfortable working in quote unquote emerging markets. But that company ultimately didn't pan out the way we had hoped. And so we ran into some problems on the technology. And at the same time, in that experience, I was actually kind of interacting quite a bit with the telecoms industry at the time, because one of the applications was remote powering of telecom towers. And so I ended up meeting a lot of people in the telecom industry and getting exposed and familiar with mobile money, which was in fact at that time starting to emerge in India and Bangladesh. So long story short, I left that, and I actually I knew people in the Azam group for many years in Tanzania, and I had, in particular, I knew Abu Bakr Bakresa, who is one of the directors of the company, and he and I had been in touch for many years, and we had batted around the idea of different ideas for some time. And I was basically at that point, I was rolling off a previous startup, and we kind of talked, and he proposed the idea, okay, maybe I could come and work and with him for a little bit to see what opportunities there might be in the technology space. Because I think his perspective and the Azam Group's perspective in general was, maybe a little bit on the Azam Group in general.
Yeah.
It's just it's an amazing company, and what the chairman Zeba Chris has been able to do over the last 40 years is absolutely remarkable. And I'll give you an example of how like just the understanding of marketing and the kind of vision for the product and the brand. So I remember, I'm getting a little bit ahead on your questions, but we were running Sarafu, which is this B2B e-commerce startup that we've been building in the last 2 or 3 years. There was a particular product that he had launched called Ukwaju, and that product was a new product in the market. Nobody had ever kind of manufactured this in Tanzania before. And we were selling like tens of thousands of cases of this thing that had never been released before, but just, it was just incredible. And so going back to Azam Group and the founder and how he's built this incredible brand in the region. And then my discussions with Abubakar around, well, is there a way to leverage this brand in the technology space? And so we started exploring that idea, and that's how we came up with this idea for AzamPay, which is a kind of a ecosystem built around addressing some of the problems that FMCGs, so fast-moving consumer good manufacturers, have in the space, in the market, as well as bringing in some of the digital innovations around payments and payments processing to kind of create and manage supply chains better, reduce frictions around payments and deliveries, help manufacturers and the retail shops interact better. So that was the genesis of this whole concept, was having this incredible brand that has been built and kind of continues to have a tremendous value proposition for consumers in Tanzania, and then seeing how that can be leveraged in the digital space through some of these new tools that we knew would be emerging in Tanzania and East Africa in general, but are still in the early stages.
No, I think it's wonderful. And I think the Azam brand, of course, it has also the consumer propositions and, has a legacy in Tanzania that we're all familiar with. And of course, Azam, I think, has a pay TV business and other spin-offs around that brand. So I think it's well known. And even in Kenya, we know that. I think the ice creams are here as well. But really, I think it's an interesting switch from, fast-moving consumer goods, into technology. And I get the sense, of course, that you were the catalyst behind that new spin-off. And I think if I read correctly, the group is like a $1 billion per year revenue business, correct?
Yeah, I think across all their various segments. I mean, I'm not familiar with the exact numbers, but it's definitely up there. And they have operations obviously in Kenya, in all across most of East Africa, down to South Africa and Rwanda, Uganda, et cetera, et cetera. So it spans quite a bit of the region, and it cuts across many verticals in the manufacturing space. So it's a big group, and like you said, trust. It's a trusted brand, and it has that kind of value money perception across the consumer base. So that's really where the opportunities for this type of digital play presented itself.
Great. So I don't know whether maybe before we jump into AzamPesa, which of course was launched just last week, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about Sarafu, because even when I started interacting with you, I think it was last year, I think Sarafu was the conversation we started having when we were looking at the possibility of doing this podcast. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what that does, and then we'll segue into AzamPesa thereafter.
Sure. So Sarafu was developed around this idea that manufacturers, there's a supply chain between the manufacturer and the retail shop that sells to the end consumer. Okay, and it's full of various levels of different middlemen that either provide value or not. It's actually very opaque. You don't really know what's going on. And actually, one of the key problems in that supply chain, I mean, there are many issues, but one of them that was striking to me was, like, for example, if a customer wanted to buy so many bags of Azam flour from Azam, from the manufacturing company, the process would be, to deposit a certain amount of money into the bank account. You get a receipt from the bank, then you take a WhatsApp picture, you send that to the finance department.
Wow.
Take that WhatsApp picture, then they look it up on the computer to see whether the payment was made. Then that goes on a Skype thread to the shipping department, who then ships out the product. And somebody takes a bathroom break or is out of the office, it could take 2 or 3 days. So we were looking at some of these things and trying to say, well, how do you make this more streamlined? And that was the original concept around Sarafu, was how do you facilitate these transactions better? So ultimately what we ended up focusing on really was building this digital platform between the retail shop and the manufacturer. And this is being done in other parts of Africa, like you have in Kenya, you have Twiga, and of course you have Soko Watchers, and now I think Wasoko.
Yes.
Actually, Wasoko is present in Tanzania. So it's not like we're doing anything dramatically new in that sense. However, some of the things that we are doing with respect to Sarafu that I think are a little bit unique. One is, and I don't know if this is the case for the other ones, but one is we only allow for digital transactions to happen. So we don't have a call center, and we don't let anybody place an order in any way other than on a smartphone application. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is when we wanted to launch this business, our thinking was scale, right? How do we scale this across the country? And we knew that we could not scale with call centers. And we also knew that transacting in cash creates a tremendous amount of friction and complication and difficulty. And also it obfuscates the real value of being transacted.
Okay.
So if somebody is paying in cash, then the driver can take some and then say, oh, maybe you need to give me a little bit extra because this is in high demand, and you never know, right? But when the transaction is digital, there's absolutely no way that the payment can be made other than what is actually in the book, right? There's no manipulation of a digital payment on the part of the driver or the seller or anybody in the middle. And so we stuck to that. In fact, it slowed our growth a bit, and many people complained. Even the customers said, why don't you open a call center? I want to use this stupid app. But we stuck to our guns, right? And actually, after a couple of orders, the customers started to habituate themselves into a new behavior. And now we don't face that challenge anymore. In fact, we've actually changed the behavior of many of these customers, because now instead of ordering, they typically ordered between, say 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. every day. And that's peak traffic hours, so orders would get delayed. We pushed half our orders past 9 p.m. So the app itself, people are starting to realize there's value to it, and they're taking advantage of that value. So Sarafu is kind of like this digital platform marketplace. We manage the payments digitally, and we manage the logistics digitally. So in fact, the customer on our app right now can place him and then click on a link and then see where that order is how that order is moving towards his shop. So if you want an update in terms of where's the order on its way to delivery, has it left the warehouse? Is it, how many stops away is it from my location? When am I going to get it? So these are all things that we felt were important to create value in order for this to scale. So we have transparency around shipping. We have transparency around pricing. And actually the pricing transparency is another major issue that both manufacturers and retailers struggle with, right? So if you don't have transparent pricing, price can be manipulated. So for example, what we've seen, the middlemen do, or the kind of the non-digital wholesalers do, is they might know that a product could potentially going to be in high demand.
Yes.
Say it's a particular type of thing that they know, hey, a soccer game or a football match is coming. People will be buying soda. Why don't we just buy a lot of soda right now and we'll hold it? And then when the football match comes and people want to buy soda, they'll raise the price, right? So this type of market manipulation happens quite a bit in the informal space. And so for manufacturers, they might be manufacturing according to the demand of the market, but at the same time, the customers may not have the product available. So you have parts of the city where the product of the manufacturer is not available, but they've actually met the demand. The problem is the distributor is holding it so that they can maximize the value of that product that they're holding, so that they can, make more profit. Now that might be in the benefit of that middleman, but it's not the benefit of the manufacturer, and it's not in the benefit of the retailer, right? For the manufacturer and the retailer, the idea is, how do I get my product available to the end consumer as reliably and as efficiently and as uniformly as possible? And so by creating this transparency around price and creating this digital payment method as the only method of payment, what we've done is actually set that bar, not only for the Azam products, because we also distribute many non-Azam products, including products from companies that might even be competitive to Azam. We're selling certain products from METL, we're selling certain products from Azania, And so they all benefit from this market price mechanism, which eliminates, maybe doesn't entirely eliminate, but it certainly creates a level of guarantee for that retailer that, hey, if you're selling me at too high, I can just buy it from these guys at the price I know that it's supposed to be.
And then there's also the credit facilities behind that, right? For the merchant, right?
Yes, the credit facility for the merchant. So of course, you know, credit, in fact, in Kenya, I think, of course, this is a very controversial thing. And my take on credit, digital credit in these types of markets is, as much as you want to use alternative data for credit, I'm not very comfortable giving loans on alternative credit, unsecured loans to consumers like that. I think it's open to a lot of abuse. So for us, our interest is we're giving credit on supplier, we're essentially giving supplier credit, right? We're giving credit on products that shops that we have a history with of selling those products are purchasing, right? So it's not like we're giving them cash that they can go buy, decide to buy a motorcycle or pay for you know, a weekend lunch. It's credit against those products which they must sell to get, you know, so they can make their profit. So we did some survey research on this, and the survey said we don't want cash credit, we want supplier credit, because as soon as you get cash credit, there's a temptation, or there's maybe somebody else who says, hey, if you have this, can you give it to me to do this or that? And so they don't even want to have that option. They'd rather get the credit as supply. So that's what we've been focusing on the credit side.
And at this point, I mean, how big is Sarafu? I mean, what sort of, if you can share, I mean, numbers, merchants, I mean, what sort of high level numbers are you doing with the Sarafu offering?
Yeah, sure. So high level, it's about 10,000 30-day active customers in Tanzania, but that's actually just the Dar es Salaam region. So we actually haven't expanded outside of Dar es Salaam yet.
Wow, that's within a 2-year time frame, right? About 2 years?
Yeah, that's about 24 months, 18 to 24 months, like that. And it's about, in terms of value transacted per month, it's about 6.1 or 6.2 billion shillings we're up to. So I can't remember the exact you know, the conversion of that to US dollars, but we've definitely been growing because it's a very difficult business, right? Margins on FMCG distribution are razor thin. And so you could potentially scale and show tremendous numbers on gross merchandise value, but the question is, what's the profitability? So we're really also focusing on trying to manage the profitability and then grow and scale based on what actually works in the long term.
I really like that. So it's really more around sustainability first, figuring the model out, and then seeing how to scale it up beyond that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, fantastic. So I'm guessing that Sarafu probably was informative when it came to obviously coming up with a new proposition, which is AzamPesa. And maybe we can jump into that now, and you can tell us a little bit more about what it is, what makes it so unique or different, and, you know, kind of like, you know, what different angle it brings to the market.
Sure. Yeah, they actually grew up together. In fact, the only reason AzamPesa came later is because, you know, the licensing requirements for a Pesa wallet are much more stringent and onerous than for opening something like Sarafu, which is an e-commerce website. So it took us a while to catch them up, right? But actually, in reality, both of them were part of the same ecosystem that we had developed from the beginning. Very attractive use cases for Pesa wallets around P2P transfer, merchant payment or bill payment, and cash out. And those are so attractive and so lucrative that going beyond that use case has become almost an afterthought for some of the businesses that are operating in that space. So for us, we knew that in order for us to succeed in the e-commerce space, we had to have the correct Pesa wallet infrastructure and application so that the two of them can be working together. And so AzamPesa was born from this idea that if you look at the digital payment space in Tanzania specifically, I'll speak about Tanzania. I know Kenya market is a little bit different, but in Tanzania, still 90 to 93% of all transactions take place are cash. Okay, they're not mobile money based, they're not digital. And you can forget about credit card, it's like probably 0.02% or something like that. It's very, very small. But The digital payments are primarily mobile money, and still the vast majority of payments are still in cash. So the question is, why are so many payments still in cash? Well, one of the reasons for that is there aren't a lot of incentives for, digital, the mobile money platforms are right now are not solving the problems of supply chains and distribution and point of sale transactions the way they are solving the problems of payments over distance. So a P2P transfer is much easier than driving to someone's house and giving them money, or driving to a village and giving your parents money.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a very quick transfer. Whereas sale transaction is easier, if not more easy to do in cash than it is to do on mobile. Okay, and then even coming back to Sarafu, all right, Sarafu B2B transactions typically are not done on digital because the transaction fees are just exorbitantly too high for a B2B transaction. So if I'm transacting a B2B payment, and the transaction fee is 2% of the value of the payment, or say 3% of the value of the payment, you've literally taken half my margin just on the payment. So it's not worth it for me to pay in digital. I'm going to pay in cash.
Yeah.
Or even potentially use the banking system, which is still cheaper than mobile money. So what we saw is just a lack of segmentation of the market. And then, of course, if you go to the MNO wallets and say, well, I have this great idea for an e-commerce site, and would you work on this and that? You could be talking 2 or 3 or 4 years to get traction, right? These are very slow, large moving vessels that are not quick and agile, nor I don't think are they very motivated to kind of build on top of the innovations that somebody else is doing. Okay, so we're talking about open APIs in this day and age. Can you do an open API with an MNO right now in Tanzania? I'm not sure. Okay, I haven't heard of it. There's a lot of all the integrations that we do seem to be very, very complex and time consuming. So for us, we needed a Pesa wallet that was nimble, agile, quick to move, open for people to do business on. And then also, if you look at the payments networks as they function in places like, say, the United States or Europe, you have functionality in digital payment methods that don't exist in mobile money. So I'll give you a good example. Trust. Okay, if I go to a gas station in the United States and I use my credit card to make a payment, that credit card will reserve a certain amount of money on my credit card, like it'll block off, say, $50, and I can buy up to $50 of gas. Okay, so say I buy $35.55 of gas. Then what happens in the background is that credit card then says, okay, release this $50 hold, and then pay the $35 to the gas station, and then we'll get that $35 from the person who owns the credit card at the end of the month. Okay, that's what happens in the background. Is with mobile money, there's no trust mechanism currently in place. So transactions happen, but there's no way of holding funds to make sure that they actually happen when they need to. So I'll give you a good example of how that created a problem for us in Sarafu. In Sarafu, when we started, customers didn't want to pay up front. They said, I don't ever pay up front. I pay only when the product shows up in my grocery store or my shop. So if you want me to pay, I'll do the digital payment, but I'll only do it when you show up with the goods. So we tried it, okay? So we said, okay, you don't have to pay up front, pay by digital, but once we get there, you can pay. The truck shows up at the shop. The guy says, okay, here, let me pay. And then he says, oh, sorry, I don't have float on, I don't have, sorry, not float. I don't have any money on my wallet. Let me go to the agent and deposit some cash, and then I'll pay you once I do that. And now my truck is sitting there for 30 minutes while this guy is trying to find an agent who has enough money to deposit in his wallet, and then he comes back and makes payment. And it screws everything up, right? You cannot run e-commerce when your truck drivers are waiting for people to go to agents and deposit money, right? So we saw these issues, and we realized that you need to start addressing some of these use cases that go beyond P2P and merchant payment and this stuff. And so that's kind of the impetus behind AzamPesa is let's get a wallet out there. Let's start solving some of these problems piece by piece. And let's start creating value for consumers and addressing some of the issues that are not being addressed in the market around trust, around efficiency, these types of things that we were seeing that would benefit.
I'm guessing that AzamPesa has certain key benefits over your more conventional mobile money. Like you've just brought up the trust issue, which again mimics what happens on your classical sort of credit card scenario in the US. But I imagine that there are other key benefits to the wallet as opposed to some of the more telco-linked options that are currently in the market, right?
Yeah, so we plan to release a bunch of different benefits. I mean, I'm not going to go into details just yet because there are actually 3 or 4 of them coming out in the next few weeks.
Okay.
And we want to launch those. But there will be, and in fact, this issue of trust is one of them that we're working on. We've been working on for the last several months. So we want to release those into the market. And the idea with AzamPesa is there has to be a +1, right? There cannot be, we cannot just simply do what everyone else is doing. We want to come with something that is unique and innovative and that addresses the pain points in the market where we see that we can kind of expand the pie, right? We're not necessarily interested in replicating what everyone else is doing. We're interested in adding to what everyone else is doing, okay? And in doing so, you know, that 90% of transactions that are still in cash, maybe that will become 85%, or maybe it will become 83%, and we can continue to chip away on that. And from my perspective, I think everyone in the ecosystem will benefit because if more cash, more transactions are made digitally, then you know there's interoperability in a place like Tanzania. People can move money from one wallet to another. It can continue to circulate digitally, and then everybody will benefit. And people will become more habituated into purchasing digitally, and that benefits everyone in the ecosystem.
So I imagine one of the big challenges to driving adoption of AzamPesa is going to be the fact that people are already somewhat locked into their proprietary, you know, mobile network platforms in as much as there's interoperability in the marketplace. So
yes,
in terms of now sort of building or sort of getting through that barrier, I mean, how do you see that happening? Because again, it's just almost like the way that I, for instance, in Kenya, when I'm using Safaricom, the default is M-Pesa, right? And of course, here they have a ridiculous market share, which is quite unlike what we see in Tanzania, where there's a bit more, you know, equitable or more spread out market, you know, spread around mobile money. But now you're another player coming on top. So how do you see yourself and AzamPesa sort of trying to distinguish itself or position itself somewhat above and beyond what people are already used to?
Yeah, very good question. And we've thought a lot about this. How do we position ourselves in the market? So first of all, you're 100% correct. People already have wallets. They're doing everything they want to do right now. So why would they open an AzamPesa account? So there are some reasons, and maybe I can talk about one of those reasons, right? One of the kind of functions that we're going to add to the wallet that might not be available in other wallets that would maybe push some adoption. So one thing that we're doing, which we are actually about to release in the next couple of days, is it's a simple code redemption tool. But what it allows for is a manufacturer, and we're starting with Azam, but we plan to do this with other manufacturers in the region. It allows a manufacturer to give a direct discount to an end consumer, like a consumer of a particular good. So for example, say you have a soda bottle or a water bottle, okay? And you can put a code inside the top of that cap, all right? That code, the customer gets the bottle, he opens the cap, he sees his code there, he goes on his AzamPesa wallet, he gets a redemption. So say he bought a 500 shillings worth of a soda, and then he gets a cash back of 500 shillings in his Pesa wallet, and he can spend that on whatever he wants. He could buy another soda, or he could pay for Luku or whatever else he wants to pay for, okay? So that's one concept. So the idea here is, how do you get manufacturers who don't necessarily have any visibility directly on the end consumer to start building relationships with end consumers? So if you go to supermarkets in Europe or United States, you have coupons, right? You go to a supermarket aisle, you scan a coupon, the system of the grocery store recognizes that coupon, gives you a discount, and then the manufacturer pays the grocery store that 25 cents or whatever that coupon was worth. Yes. So we don't have that in Tanzania or in many parts of East Africa because you don't have Carrefours. You don't have, we have manji shops, right? We have dukas. These are informal markets. So they're not going to be scanning anything, right? There's no way for them to scan. And if you were to say, oh, let me give you a scanner, no one would scan. They just sell the scanner on the street and then go buy something else, right? They're not interested. So how do manufacturers develop relationships with consumers? Well, this is one way you can do that, right? You can have a direct relationship with your consumer by giving them a benefit that even the distributor will not be able to. They cannot sell an open soda bottle, right? No one's going to buy it. So, these are the types of innovations that we're planning right now to drive adoption for AzamPesa and create value propositions for consumers and for merchants that currently are not available in the market. And so this is one of the concepts, and we have other ones coming up. But really, if you look at the kind of philosophical underpinnings of it, is how do you create transparency and efficiency in the market? So transparency being how do people see what is actually going on in markets where things generally tend to be opaque, and how do you in terms of lower cost of building those types of relationships? So what we do is we lower the cost of the manufacturer to talk directly to a consumer, and then give them the facility to do that through technology. That's the idea.
So ultimately, it's about more utility, more insight, more value addition than your plain vanilla, mobile payment platform or solution, right?
Exactly. It's thinking, what are the pain points? So other sets of pain points might be around, there's so much, like in US and Europe, you have these massive e-commerce giants. You have Amazon, you have, in China, you have Alibaba. You don't see e-commerce as much in places in different parts of Africa. And you have certain players, like you have Jumia, who's tried to do it, but still e-commerce is a relatively new thing. The question is, why is that the case? Actually, e-commerce is not new, and it's happening, right? So if you look at social commerce, I would imagine that social media commerce in these markets is going to be as big as what an Amazon might be in the United States.
Yeah.
Okay. But at the same time, you don't have the infrastructure that Amazon has. So, right, you don't have the connectivity around logistics, around payments, around all these things. Everything is being done. You find what you want online, and then you go figure out how to make it happen in the street somewhere. And so how do you build the connective tissue around creating the similar kinds of user experiences that people enjoy in these other markets around e-commerce, given the fact that you have a wholly different environment here where the way people like to transact? It's not a question of giving people what you think they need in some ways. It's also understanding where they are and what are the tools that they need to facilitate commerce in the way that they're comfortable with now.
Absolutely. Well, Firas, I think that has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing so much with us. I know you're really busy and you're running this incredible business that's creating all these digital propositions across all these different segments. And I think we could probably talk for another 30 minutes, but I just want to say thank you so much for this. I look forward to us having more conversations around AzamPesa in the future, especially given that you're gradually rolling out the new capabilities. But sounds like an amazing way forward, and we're excited to see what the future holds for this new innovative wallet that hopefully is going to do very, very well in the Tanzanian market.
Thanks so much, Moses. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks a lot. I very much appreciate being on here, and look forward to talking more in the future.
Thank you so much, and have a good day.